Hello, hello, hello.
How are you
Hi,
guys? Can you guys hear me
fantastic.
All
okay?
right.
Yeah, can
Good.
you hear me okay?
Yep.
Cool.
Okay. Well, first I wanted to say thank you to the 13th man for allowing us to do this. This is a great opportunity, so I'm very grateful. Um, I want to thank Miss Libby for coming out here, or Libby for coming out here and taking the time out of her day to talk to us about financial literacy. And I'm passing to Dylan to talk a little bit about the 13th man.
Yeah, so I've been a part of 13th Man since the start. I believe 2015. I was in 7th grade, I believe. And I've learned a lot through spaces like this. And as many people here should know, the mission statement, why me, why now, why not? So that motto kind of translates in almost every aspect of life, and I think it will really be beneficial when you're talking about financial literacy. Why not learn at a young age? Why you have to wait until you're 30, 35, or until you're in debt to be like, oh, maybe I should have went this way. So this is the things that we learn here at the 13th Man.
Yep. I wanted to open the floor up for you, Libby, and just to tell us, how you came to be in the finance industry and why you feel finance is important to know.
Sure, absolutely. Well, thanks so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited to be here tonight. So I'm from the Maryland area, and then I went to University of Michigan. And after college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, like most college students. I'm sure Caleb and Dylan, although Dylan, you do have multiple businesses, so maybe you do know what you want to do, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. And so I decided that I wanted to join Teach for America because I wanted to give back to my community and also because education and empowerment is so important to me. So I worked on the south side of Chicago for 2 years where I taught high school special education math and algebra. And then from there, unfortunately, like about a year into my service, unfortunately, my dad passed away suddenly. And I decided that, I wanted to be closer to my mom and my family, which was in Maryland. And I happened to, my now mentor, Carol Nevins, ended up recruiting me to work for Merrill Lynch. And so it's kind of fun. It's kind of crazy how things work out. And since she recruited me, I've been at Merrill for about 4.5 years now, going to be 5, I guess, in August. And so that's kind of my really long way of getting to Merrill Lynch. But like, why do I think finance? Why do I think finance is important? Because just like going to the doctor, just like going to the dentist, your finances are probably, if not the most, one of the most important things. And if you don't have that under control, a lot of things can spiral out of control. And there's really small things that you can do to really make such a difference. And just, in talking to Caleb and Dylan, who are, the next generation, incredible young men, it just really shows the importance of, why it's important to start now and really how time, if you do small things now, it can add up to millions of dollars over your lifetime. And we'll kind of get into that into the show.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. I wanted to touch on a common misconception when it comes to finance. I hear a lot, especially with college students around me. A lot
Yep.
of the times people think when you have good finances, it means you have or you know how to make a ton of money, when it's not necessarily what it means. It just means you know how to get, or you're learning how to get the best value for the money you do have, and you're learning how to manage your money. Would you like to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So just because you make a lot of money, that really doesn't matter. And I tell this to all of my clients. What matters is how much you save. And if you're doesn't matter if you're making $1 million a year. If you make $1 million a year and you spend $1 million a year, guess how much you have in savings left over? Zero, right? So it really doesn't matter what you earn. It matters what you save, and every single person can make that choice to save. So if you have student loans or things like that, I know there's a number of young men on this, listening to this. It's not saying that you can't live your life, but if you can buy a pair of Jordans or you can buy, 3 Starbucks a week, you can afford to pay yourself first or save money and pay yourself before you pay anyone else. So I would say just because you make money doesn't mean you have money. And just because you spend money also means that you have a negative outflow in your account. So it's really, and I think it's really easy in today's day and age, Facebook, Instagram. I guess the kids are now using TikTok. It's really easy to kind of show your life and show how much you're spending, but that really doesn't reflect how much you actually have in your bank account. So it's really important to separate the two and have that kind of under control.
Yep. I also want to talk about like just the idea of learning before college. I'm actually writing a paper right now for my English class on why I think that personal finance should be a Carolina core here at USC. We're taking classes such as chemistry that teach us how to find the molar mass of a molecule when I've already done that, in high school. And a lot of these students are taking out student loans and they don't know what they're getting themselves into. And just that financial literacy at a young age would be very influential in making decisions and just knowing like what you are doing with your money.
Yeah, so. I couldn't agree with you more. I think if you are going to college and you're taking on $100,000-$200,000 of debt, and you don't know what interest is, you don't know what principal is, and you don't know how that's going to impact the next maybe 10, 20, 30 years of your life, financial literacy should absolutely be required. And you need, before you sign for anything, right, you don't just want to sign your life away, you need to understand what that means. And so getting the resources, whether it's talking to a mentor, whether it's talking to your parents, or someone who does this for a living, and have an understanding of what this means, because that loan in some parts of the country, $200,000 loan is equivalent to what some people's mortgages are. And if you think about what a mortgage is, most people pay that in their working years. So it's really important to have an idea. And, Caleb, in our conversations, I know you mentioned that financial literacy course was life-changing. And I can just tell in our conversations that we have had how much more informed and educated you are, because you did take those steps in order to better yourself.
Yes. I heard you mention, oh, go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, I was going to say, especially when it comes to college, it's also important to be very intentional about even your degree as well. Where you're going to school, your options, which courses are you going to take, because that also helps you plan for your financial future. So depending on how much you expect in return for your degree, you could pick which school you're going to go to based on that knowledge as well, too. That's a very important thing to kind of plan for. What is the purpose of what you're doing with your money right now as well?
Yeah. And Dylan, I think that's a really good point. When I meet with my clients, one of the first questions I ask them is, number one, what keeps you up at night? Number two, what is the purpose of your wealth? Why are you accumulating all of this money? What are you giving up today so you can have a better future? And so I think that's really important to consider. And then also thinking, like you just said, Dylan, the rate of return on your investment. If you decide that you want to go to art school, that's great. But, are you going to be able to pay off what you earned? If you're the next Jackson Pollock, you're going to pay it off in no time, right? But that, it took them a while to get there. So you kind of just have to think about that. And that's not to say that you shouldn't follow your passions, but again, every decision should be well informed and think about all the different avenues and possibilities, so that, you can hope for the best, but like also plan for the worst, which is what I do, with my clients, and just talking about kind of like financial blind spots, maybe things that they hadn't thought through.
When I was looking at, what does finance mean? One of the big things I saw under that umbrella of what falls under finance was, investing, budgeting, saving. But I feel like budgeting and saving really do align with a lot of college students. And that's like a lot of the audience I want to target today. So could you expand on, the importance of budgeting and saving?
Absolutely. So everyone that I work with, I don't care how much money you have, everyone is doing a budget. Why do we need to do a budget? Because first of all, we need to understand, what is the money that's coming in? What is the money after taxes? Don't forget, you have to pay Uncle Sam first. What is the money that's actually hitting my bank account? Because if I make, if I have $1,000 a month, right, that's hitting my bank account, well, I need to understand, like, where is that money going and how much I'm saving. And so the way that I kind of, and I'm happy to send this to you afterwards, but the way that I kind of think about budgeting is like the 50, 30, and 20% rule. So 50% are things that you want to, 50% of your after-tax income that hits your bank account, those are things that you want to spend on needs. So think housing, rent, food, right? Food, when I say food, I mean groceries. That doesn't mean Uber Eats or takeout, because that's like triple the cost of, what the grocery store pays,
Yeah.
or what you pay for, at the grocery store. So those are
Mhm.
things that you can't live without, that are your quality of life. Then you have 30% things that are wants. Okay. So wants could be like Uber Eats, or, let's see, shopping, or the most expensive internet plan, or the most expensive cable bill. Those are things that you could live without, are nice to have. And then this 20% is the most important thing. And what do you think that is? That is paying yourself first. So you always want to pay. I don't know about you guys, but I want to pay myself first before I pay taxes, before I pay anybody else. That's the first line item. And so that 20% of your after-tax income is really what you want to make sure that you are paying, that you are saving. Because if you don't save, then you don't have that opportunity to grow and invest. And so when looking at your budget, think about, what are the things that I could give up so that I can retire early, I can buy a house, I can pay for, if I want to have kids, I want to pay for their education. What are those things that I want to give up so I can save? And if you can do more than 20%, I would say you're a rock star. But I also recognize that a lot of you are in school, you do have student loans, there are other things. So maybe that 20% is not as flexible. But I really urge you to really look through your budget and see, okay, am I getting takeout, or am I getting Starbucks 5 times a week? What if I limit that to 2 times a week and I save 20? So just think about those things and be really critical, and also give yourself some room. Recognize that budgets can be flexible, but if you pay attention, you start monitoring it and start tracking it, that's empowering. You are in charge of your finances. You know where your money is going. And so that's why, the first place to start with finances is really your budget, to understand kind of, where your money is going and how you're spending it.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next, I wanted to talk about, tackling debt. College it's a big time where a lot of people are starting to get credit cards, and then once you get out, you start paying your student loans, usually about 6 months after you get out of college. So it can be really easy to get caught up in the pay the minimum payment, but a lot of the times, if you pay that minimum payment on those credit card bills or on those student loans, you end up paying for a very long time. So could you touch on maybe ways that tackling debt can be smarter?
Absolutely. So a couple of things. Number one, if you have debt right now and it's not student loans and you have credit card debt, that probably means that you should cut up your credit card, and that means you're spending more than what you're earning. So we'll get to that eventually. But the first thing that I would do is I would make a list of every single type of debt that you owe, and then categorize it from highest interest rate to lowest interest rate. So for example, federal student loans, 6%. Other loans, whatever that is, and categorize it from greatest to least. The way that you want to pay it off, and in most situations, obviously everyone's situation is different, and I'm happy to talk to people one-off if they have specific questions, but typically you want to pay the highest debt off first to lowest. And the reason for that is, if you have credit card debt and you are paying 25% interest versus student loans and you have 6%, right? That is a huge delta between 25 and 6%, right? That's a 21% difference. And so you want to make sure that you're paying off the highest debt first, and then, continue to pay that. Now, minimum payment is probably the biggest misconception. The minimum payment is the minimum. Okay. No one wants to be a C student. I would always want to be the A+ student, right? So actually, let's call minimum payment the F student, because that is you didn't do anything. Okay. You just paid the minimum. Okay. So the way that you want to think about that is, if I pay the minimum, I'm going to be paying interest, and it shows. If you pay the minimum amount, you can pay it off in 10 years. Well, no, if it's credit card debt, you don't want to do that. And again, this is where the budget comes into play. Okay. So you really want to pay off your full balance every single month. Now, you're saying, Libby, that is crazy, I can't do that. Well, what does that mean? That means that you are spending more money than the income you are receiving. You are spending more than you are earning. You need to cut. I don't know, you need to, obviously you need to live, and there's food and all that stuff, but you really need to look through your budget and figure out, why am I spending way more than what I'm earning? Because you are in the red. And so that's where, going back to the budget, you need to figure that part out. And so that's kind of the way that I would look at things. Obviously, if you're on student loans and you're using that to fund your college sources, of course it's going to look like that. But if you are also taking on credit card debt, you need to think about the opportunity cost and how much you're actually paying in fees to the credit card company and things like that. So that's how I would kind of categorize that. And the last thing I'll say is, there's two different types of people. There's certain people who can have a credit card and they say, okay, I have $1,000 in my bank account. I'm going to spend $200 this month. I'm not going to spend over that. I'm good to go. There are other people that say, hey, I have a credit card. My limit's $10,000. I'm ready to go. Okay. And they only have $1,000 in their account, right? If you are that type of person, cut up your credit card and just use a debit card. And the reason for that is you cannot spend more money that is in your bank account, right? And if you are, then there's one of two ways to fix that. You either have more of an income, earn more money, get a second job, get a third job, or spend less. It's really that simple.
Yep.
The way that I think about that is like calories, right? If I eat 5 donuts, no matter how much I work out, I know I'm going to gain weight, right? And so it's kind of like figuring that out. So that's kind of how I relate. And I know that's kind of probably hard to hear, but at the same time, that is how balancing a budget works, which is you need to save more and you can't spend more than you earn.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would say there's a factor of financial literacy which involves a lot of discipline. Because it's
Absolutely.
easy to be swayed to spend a lot of money, or you get a raise and then you're like, oh, because I have more money now, I could spend more, and that's a misconception. The more you save, the better. The more you should
Absolutely.
be, yeah, you should be having more money coming in than you are spending, because if you reach a point where it's, you say you may have some sort of balance, if a emergency comes into play and it can mess up your entire financial plan, then that means you're not saving enough still. So all those factors need to be incorporated in a budget, because you got to plan for every little aspect of your life, including the little dinners or the weekends, all the little stuff.
Absolutely. And what I will say, a study that was published recently showed that the average American couldn't afford a $400 emergency expense. So what do they have to do? Take on credit card debt. So Dylan, you make in such an incredible point. I work with all, if you have a single income, we say, okay, maybe I have 6 months worth of fixed expenses. If I have 2 incomes coming in, if I'm married or whatever that looks like, maybe 3 to 6 months. But you really want to plan for those emergencies, because what are you going to do if your tire breaks down or someone breaks your window or whatever? I live in DC and that stuff happens all the time. Actually, both of those things have happened to me this year. But anyway, so you want to plan for those things. And if you're not thinking about those, and then something happens, then what are you going to do? So you really need to think about those emergency expenses and make sure you have that emergency fund, not for shopping, not for food, but if God forbid something happens, I'm prepared. I have enough in the bank to support that type of emergency fund.
So, Libby, I know you work within private wealth management. So, could you talk about maybe a little bit on what that entails and what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work in Bethesda, not too far from here, and I work with a number of individuals and families, as well as business owners, all different types of clients. I would say they are uniquely successful in that they need help with, creating and maintaining, a financial plan. And so we work individually with clients to create custom financial plans based on their goals and their needs. And I would say, as you continue to make more money, what you don't know is actually scarier than what you know. And so a lot of our clients who are business owners are trying to figure out, okay, how can I reward my employees, or, what is the best way to save? And what I will say is, a number of clients who are close to retirement, their largest asset that they come to us with is their retirement plan. So I cannot stress saving early enough. What I will say is, it doesn't matter how much you earn. It matters how much you save. I have a number of teachers. I have a number of, hairdressers that have millions of dollars because They don't spend their money. All they do is save, they squirrel away, and then they invest it and they continue to watch it and let it grow. And, that's what compound interest is, which is your money continues to make money. And so that's kind of a little bit about my practice. I'm with the Rubin Group, right in Bethesda. And so that's kind of that's basically what we do.
Okay. Awesome. I asked some of my friends, some questions they had about finance, just to get a little bit of information. And, one of the biggest things they asked me, what is a credit card? Like how do credit cards work?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question, because I feel like people think they know what it is, but then they don't actually know what it is. So a credit card in its most basic form is a way that you can, go to a restaurant, any type of vendor, online shopping, and say, okay, I'm buying something for $200. Then the credit card, it goes directly to your account. And then, you kind of see that. Like, I check my credit cards every single day. So if there's fraud or something, I look at that every day. But basically, it goes into your account, and then you are supposed to pay, it says, okay, payment due date, and then you pay the full balance of your account. But what a credit card is not, is it's not free money. It's not money that you don't have. So that is the critical, I think, misconception of, oh, this is my limit. That means that's how much I can spend. No, that's not what that means. How much you can spend is reflective of what's in your bank account. And then remember that 20%, right? If I'm trying to save 20%, well, I can't just blow it all in 1 month, right? So a credit card is a means to purchasing different things, and you can get different rewards and things like that. But again, if you are going to view it as money to spend that you don't have, then that's the wrong way to approach it. It should be treated the same way as a debit card, which is, if you use your debit card and you have $1,000 in the bank account, you try to buy something for $2,000, you're going to get declined because you don't have that money in your bank account. And so that is the critical piece of what a credit card should be used for. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Sounds good. Let's see.
Can I just show you something really quickly, Caleb and Dylan? I'm going to share my screen because this is really important in terms of how do I? Okay, your computer. Oh, let's see. I want to share my screen, but it's all right. Caleb, why didn't you ask the next question while I'm trying to figure out how to do this?
I was going to ask, could you touch on maybe like the different types of saving accounts and why putting your money in a saving account could be smarter than, just holding on to it? I have a lot of friends that save, but they don't want to put their money into a savings account. They'd rather just have it sitting in their checking.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah, I can do that. So a checking account is basically, you probably have like unlimited transfers, pay your bills and things like that. Interest rates are much lower. We're talking like way less than 1%, maybe 0.01, which is, 1 basis point, which is really nothing. A savings account, and again, it depends on the institution that you have that with, can offer a little bit more of a bump in terms of your savings. What that means is you're going to earn a little bit higher interest rate, but sometimes the banks, will limit how many times you can transfer in and out of those accounts. And so you just want to be more cognizant of that. If you are the type that spends all the money in your account, I would earmark, a different type of savings account, for different savings goals, or as like an emergency fund, and that could be separate from your checking account. So those are just two different types of accounts that you can hold, like cash, and then you can also potentially hold like some CDs or certificate of deposits, which are like pretty liquid, meaning you can, they have a short-term time horizon, but sometimes they lock up your cash for a specific period of time and you earn a little bit more interest. And then there's also like a brokerage account. And again, you have to be either over 18 to open a brokerage account, which means if you want to buy and sell stocks and bonds. So I can go more into that if you want. But those are general types of accounts. And then you have retirement accounts, which you're going to definitely want to open as soon as you start working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Can you see my screen okay?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how you zoom in. But okay, so what I want to show you is what does compound interest actually mean in like real dollar terms. Now, a lot of us aren't working, which is totally fine, you know, because we're in school, or maybe we are working, maybe we have a part-time job, but this is really going to show you the power of what saving can do. So Allison, she maxes out her retirement plan every year. And she's saving money, and she starts at 25. Okay. So by the way, I think most people on this call are under 25. So the fact that you're listening to this and getting ahead, you're ahead of the game. So Allison saves. So the dark blue, she saves a total of 1.2 million from 25 to 65. Okay. So about 40 years. Okay. This light blue is what compound interest is. That means her 1.2 grew to 4.7 million. She grew her money by 75, she put in, she only saved 25% of it. Okay. And so that is what's showing what compound interest means is you don't even have to save 4.7 million, right? You can start small and your money continues to make money. Now let's look at David. Okay. David starts 10 years later. So to Dylan's point, why us? Why now? This is why, right? Even if you wait 10 years, right? He saved $941,000. Okay. But his investment only grew to $2.5 million, right? So instead of the 40 years that Allison this is 30 years. Okay. And yeah, he more than doubled his investment, but I don't know about you guys, but I would rather have 4.7 million than 2.5 million. Now, Rhonda waited 45 years. So she waited another 20 years from when Allison started. And she only put away about half of what Allison put away, 676,000, and her money barely doubled, right? Her money grew to about $1.2 million. So what does this show you? The earlier you start, the more you end up saving, but the less you actually have to save, and the more time that your money has to grow and continue to invest and double and triple and significantly grow. And so that's why saving and investing and being disciplined, like Dylan said, is so important, especially at a young age. So think about, what do I want to give up? Okay, I'm going to give up 2 pairs of shoes, or whatever I want, whatever I'm spending my money on now, so that over the long term I can be Allison and have significantly more money, go on trips and all that type of stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And that's very important, especially as it relates to saving, because if you save, you're able to kind of decide where your savings go specifically, as an emergency fund. Like me personally, I have that in a actual banking savings account because I only lose about a little less than 1% every year, but it's only for emergencies only. Then there's compound interesting as well, where you could have a Roth IRA or a regular IRA, or you could have a money markets account. There's so many resources and so many plans, even in life insurance policies, where you could do that as well and grow your money as well. But you have to be able to save to be able to do things like that. So it's very important to kind of know where your money is going as well when it relates to saving, because you can make a lot of money just by saving. You can make up to
Absolutely.
8 to 15% every year.
Well, that's a lot. I would say on average, the market, the past 100 years targets about 8% up and down,
Yeah.
and not 15%. But yeah, that's exactly right. Knowing not only doing the saving, but how do I save? Where's the most efficient place to save? And, Dylan, you brought up a Roth IRA. That's so powerful, especially for someone that's your age, extremely young, lots of time, you're like, okay, I'm going to pay the taxes now and I never have to pay the taxes again as long as I've held the account for 5 years. So that's an extremely powerful tool. You talked about life insurance, those are all planning things, but these are things, that being an adult and being responsible and, thinking and being educated is all about. And, I think you brought up some really incredible points.
Could we touch on like the different types of retirement accounts? Like I know there's like pension, there's 401k, and then the Roth IRA.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm gonna go back and share my screen again because this is
Okay.
and I'm happy to send this
Yeah. Thank you.
to everyone. How do share? Okay, here we go. Okay. Did that? Oh, here we go.
There it goes right there.
Thank you. All right. I didn't mean to go to that page. Okay. So, what are the different types of accounts? So, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. So, you can see on the left-hand side, there's 401k and 403b accounts. So, what is that? That is essentially if you work at an employer, usually you have to be full-time. You may not get that if you're part-time or you're or if you're a 1099 worker. But basically, a 401k says this is an employer-sponsored plan, and you can put up to, if you're under 50, you can put up to $20,500 in 2022 into this account. Okay, and if you want to do it pre-tax, which means, and I don't want to get too complicated, and I can go further in detail if we want. So let's just keep it simple. 401k, pre-tax, which means, if you make, let's just use easy numbers. If you make $10,000 and you save $1,000 and you want to say, okay, you know what? I listened to Libby. I think I want to I want to pay myself first before I pay taxes. I want to put $1,000 into my retirement plan. Instead of reporting to the IRS that you make $10,000, you actually report that you make $9,000, and that $1,000 grows tax deferred all the way until retirement. So you never have to pay tax on that until you pull the money out, and that's a really incredible way to save for retirement. Similarly, so that's employer-sponsored plans, and then you could potentially do a 401k Roth, which says, you know what, I'm going to pay the taxes now because I don't want to pay the taxes in the future. I'm in a lower tax bracket now, and I'm ready to pay the taxes, and I think I'm going to make more in the future. That money grows and grows and grows, and then, as I said, as long as you've held the account for 5 years, you won't have to pay taxes on that Roth 401k again. So that's employer-sponsored plans. Now, if you work part-time, and you don't have an employer that sponsors this, you could also open up a traditional IRA or a Roth IRA. A traditional IRA, you can, depending on, what your income is and all that stuff, you can contribute to that. And the limit is $6,000 or earned income. So let's say you have a part-time job and you made $3,000. You could only contribute $3,000 to the traditional IRA because you can't contribute more than what you earned. The same thing with a Roth. You decide that you want to pay the taxes now, and you don't have to pay taxes again as long as you've held the account for 5 years. And Roth is a really powerful tool, especially if you think your income is going to increase. Same thing, the limit is $6,000, and you can open that up just like you open up a brokerage account.
Oh, wow. That is definitely some useful information for sure.
Yeah, and I can send this to you afterwards. And whoever
Yeah.
you can send this out, and it goes through. The other thing that I'll show you is because you brought up pensions,
Yep.
Caleb, and so what you can see from this, and if you want to read this, great, is basically we kind of transitioned from a defined from a pension where a lot of older people have pensions, and now it transitioned to defined contribution, which means we, the workers, have to choose to save for our own retirement, and we no longer have that fixed pension that we can rely on. And so that's why it's so powerful to start saving as soon as you can, so you can build up your assets, and you can let it grow and have that time on your side and the compound interest like we talked about.
Yep. Piggybacking off of retirement funds, could we touch on maybe mutual funds? What does that mean?
Yeah,
Entail?
absolutely. How do I stop sharing the screen, or is it still going? Oh, there we go. Okay. So a mutual fund, so a lot of people talk about this. So you have mutual funds and you have exchange traded funds. So a mutual fund, think about it as active management. So I think, if I have a manager and I have to pay someone to, do research and who is trying to outperform a benchmark, I'm going to have to pay up for that management, right? So mutual funds can be a little bit more expensive. Their goal is to outperform a benchmark. An example of a benchmark is the S&P 500, right? That is a 505 largest stocks. and it's own in proportion to what the benchmark owns. So if I think I can outperform that, I'm going to pay up a little bit, and I'm going to actively select stocks that I think are going to do better based on different types of factors. So at its core, that is what a mutual fund is. What an exchange traded fund, and so mutual funds are actively managed. Think actively managed, I have to pay up for that. ETFs or exchange traded funds are less expensive, right? If I want to buy the S&P 500, you pay a much smaller fee. And the idea is I'm not going to outperform the benchmark. I'm going to get benchmark like returns. I'm going to pay less in fees. And I want some passive, I'll just follow the benchmark. So that's kind of the difference between two different types of investing, which is active and passive management. I think it depends on the type of market that you're talking about, because think about it. In less efficient markets, so like smaller type of companies, international, typically, I want to pay up. I want to have boots on the ground. I think I can, add some, more alpha to my portfolio if I do that, versus maybe the S&P 500 is fully valued and it's not, and it's efficient, and I just want to pay the lowest fee possible. So those are some considerations.
I've heard, when it comes to investing, doing a mutual fund can be like a safer option, even though it is a little more expensive, because, you have the company that whatever mutual fund you invest in is like investing in a lot of different stocks. So, if one stock doesn't do very well, you still have, the other stocks within your fund that can like save it. Or, if one stock does well, you do benefit, but the risk, I heard, is a lot lower when it comes to investing.
That's a really good question. So let's take a step back. You need to evaluate the mutual fund that you are looking at. So things that I look at as an investment professional. So we look at upside, and I don't want to get too complicated. So if I'm using words that don't make sense, like, please let me know. You just want to look at the risk that you're taking. So when the market was down, did this manager lose more than the benchmark? Did they lose less? Okay. And how do they do that in different types of environments? So how did they do that in 2008? How did they do that in March of 2020? How did they do that during the tech, boom? So you want to look at it over. Now, if they have a 1-year track record, maybe their returns look great, but like you need to look. I mean, I look at things from 1, 3, 5, 10-year basis, and I look at the risk, right? And so when I think of risk, that's really called, for anyone that's taken statistics, that is standard deviation, or like my hand movement of volatility of the portfolio. How much, what is the standard deviation, and how does that compare to the benchmark? So you need to look at it relative to the benchmark and relative to other managers in that space. To your point, mutual funds, depending on the type of mutual fund, can be fully diversified, meaning they can't own, more than 5% in a position. Whereas if you bought an individual stock and it's 40% of your portfolio, well, if the 40, if it does well, then you're going to do well. If it does poorly, you're going to do poorly. And so, diversified mutual funds and ETFs can be diversified, meaning you don't own too much in one specific stock. But then you also want to look larger, because if your mutual fund is only in large cap growth companies, so think Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, right? If you're only in that space, well, right now your portfolio is getting crushed, because that is what's, seen a lot of volatility, this as the first part of the year. So you want to own that. You want to own value companies. You want to own small caps. You want to be fully diversified across type of company, size of company, US, international, because you don't want to put all of your eggs in one basket. And so that's what I'll say about diversification, that can help mitigate that kind of standard deviation or volatility of a portfolio.
I'm taking notes because I do have a couple of mutual
You're like,
funds.
can I send you my entire portfolio? And like, can you look at it?
Because it is because one thing,
but we can do it afterwards.
Okay. Because one thing I do know about mutual funds is they're also not short-term investments.
That's a great point.
For the most part. So it's very, very important to really study these markets and these funds, and also look at their history as well to see. I like how you said, like, back in 2008 or March of 2020. These are important parts of the U.S. economy market, where the economy kind of took a hit, and see how they reacted to that. So that is very important to see, really see like the almost like the character of these funds almost, because each fund or each investment, they'll always have their own sort of characteristics. If you get into investment, I think, I don't know if it'll make sense to those that don't invest, but every portfolio, every stock, every fund, they have seasons, they have news that are particular to them, and have a lot of things that affect them. So it's very important to be aware of all those things so you know where and when, because not always to invest like, oh, I have money now, so let me invest. No, sometimes you gotta wait. Sometimes you gotta do it now. So it's very important to study the market as well. That's a very, very important thing to do.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you and more. And the other thing I would say is it's all about your time horizon. If you are going, let's say you're buying a car, okay, or you have a big purchase coming up that you know that you're going to need the money and it's in less than a year or 1 to 2 years, don't put that money at the risk. Don't put that money at risk. You don't know. No one knows what's going to happen in the market tomorrow. Is Russia going to invade Ukraine? Who knows? So like over the law, over a short time horizon, we have no idea what's going to happen. And your portfolio could potentially lose 30 to 40% if you put it all, in stocks. 2008, right? The market was down 36%. If you needed to buy a car and you put all of that in the market, well, guess what? You're not going to have, 100% of your investment. So that's why it comes down to short-term goals. What am I going to need the next 6 months if I lose my job or I get injured or whatever that looks like? 6 to 12 to 24 months. What am I going to need for like at least big expenses? And then kind of go forward from there. What is my midterm goals? What are my long-term goals? If I'm thinking about retirement and I don't need to touch this money for 50 years, is this over the long term? Is this 10% correction that we've seen in the S&P 500 going to make a big difference? Probably not over 50 years, right? Because think about where we're going to be in 50 years. We'll probably be in a virtual reality set, maybe in space, who knows, right? So think about how much is going to change in the next 50 years. And the thing that you got to look at is, are the things that you own, the things that really affect the market, or at least a company's, profitability, is earnings. Are companies making earnings? Are they profitable? Do they have the earnings to support their valuations? And that's kind of, the things that you want to evaluate in different types of market environments.
I'd like to add that also, these funds and these stocks or whatever like that, they could also be put into retirement accounts as well.
Right.
So it's not always a broker or some exterior or third party way of investing, because it could go straight to your Roth IRA, or I believe your 401k, I believe.
Yeah, so you can buy
So
usually in 401ks, they're a little bit more restricted. You can't buy individual stocks because they want to be more restrictive, because they don't want you to lose 40% of your portfolio or 90% of your portfolio. So they make it really hard to buy individual stocks. Rather, you can buy like diversified mutual funds. But yeah, you can buy that in your 401k, you can buy it in your IRA, you can buy it in a Roth, you can buy it in your brokerage account. And the brokerage account, taxable accounts, you do have to consider taxes, right? So obviously you never want taxes to be the driving decision. But if I sell something at a gain, I made 100%, well, I'm going to have to pay taxes on that. Whereas in my retirement account, well, that's tax deferred. I can do all the trading I want, and I'm not going to have to think about taxes, at least then. So that's kind of, some of the things that you want to think about. And then the other point, Dylan, I wanted to make is it's easy to look good when the market goes straight up. But it's really, really important to evaluate, how are my managers doing? How are my mutual funds? How are my stocks doing, when the market's going down and there's volatility? Because if you lose less than you need, if you lose less than what the market is, then that means you have a higher capital base to grow from. So just think about this for a second. If you, if you have $100,000, okay, and it goes down to $50,000, right? You have to make 100. So if you go from 100,000 to 50,000, you lost 50% of your portfolio, right? But to go from 50,000 to 100,000, you have to make up 100% to get back to even. So what is the risk that I'm taking? Am I comfortable with this risk when the market is going down? Not just when the market's going straight up. It's easy to be like, oh, yeah, go ahead. I'll take all the risk. But then when we see this correction, people get scared. And so that's where it comes down to asset allocation. How much should I be in stocks? What types of companies, small, mid, large, US, international? And should I own bonds, which are preservation of capital? But that's at a high level.
Oh, you're muted.
Oh, I see we have a comment from Miss Kim Arringdale talking about our thoughts on cryptocurrency. So personally, I haven't really invested in cryptocurrency, so I can't really speak too much to it. But if you guys have any thoughts.
Yeah, so I can't really comment on that just because you can't technically buy it on the publicly traded market, and that's something that we don't offer. What I will say, it is highly volatile, and people thought it was kind of a diversifier, but we've also seen a correction in cryptocurrency. But I just say, like anything else, do your research, make sure before you buy it, like, do I want to own this long term, and figure out if it makes sense for you in the context of your portfolio. And am I comfortable losing 50% of my value? So you kind of just need to do your research and also understand, what are the fees that I'm paying. And then cryptocurrency also comes with its own types of risk as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Be very. You have to be very cautious when it comes to cryptocurrency. To also understand how much value you're getting in like U.S. dollars, and also I would say is the reason why I'm very shy towards cryptocurrency is only because of the regulations on it. Until I get more knowledge and more U.S. regulations on it, I'll feel a little more comfortable trading crypto. But I think that it has huge potential. But until um, that structure is kind of set around it, I'll be very very careful.
Wow. Um, I think we hit on like a lot of the things that I really wanted to talk about. So, Dylan, if there's anything else you want to say regarding like questions for Libby or anything you were curious about.
Um, I don't really have any questions because to the point I believe in all this will just be in budgeting. I believe that's the first major step because you can't invest if you don't budget. You can't save if you don't budget. Budgeting is a very, very important aspect in our daily lives, from the food that we eat, from every single little activity, even the things that we do for pleasure, that needs to be part of our budget as well. So we know how much of every dollar we are saving, and that's a very, very important thing to know. So therefore, you can kind of project and look in the future, and in cases of, for example, as you said, the war in Ukraine, I mean, stuff like that may affect our market today in America a lot. And are you prepared to do that? To pay? Are you prepared for the possibility of hyperinflation? So that's the
Mm-hmm.
reason why I believe budgeting is very important because yes, you may be comfortable now, but tomorrow is not guaranteed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I also want to touch on, I talked about how that personal finance class was really influential in my life. But you don't even need to take a class. There's so much information on YouTube and just reading newspaper articles. Like I recently started reading the Wall Street Journal, like just information from those articles and just YouTube and all those resources you can use. Um, just to have that information and just know, how am I handling my money? Am I going about it the right way? I think it's important. So,
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think education is empowering. As I said at the beginning of the call, just like you go to the doctors, just like you go to the dentist, hopefully you really want to make sure that you have your finances in order so that you can be your most empowered self and make these decisions for you. At the end of the day, if you don't put yourself first and you don't take care of this, no one else is going to take care of it for you. And I would hate to see, you do see people end up with significant credit card debt and other types of debts because they just don't have this under control. And so I would say this is one of the most important things that you can start dealing with right now, today. Do a budget. I'll send Caleb and Dylan the budget that I have, and get started with it, and see what happens. And it could significantly impact your life and the opportunities that are available to you and your family. And it really just all starts with you. So that's what I would say. And then the last thing is, Caleb, I think that's awesome that you're reading the Wall Street Journal. That's an awesome, resource. I listen to all their they have podcasts that you can listen to. Barron's has some podcasts. Just make sure the information, and, Barron's and Wall Street Journal are great. But, with TikTok, sometimes they have these crazy things. So just make sure you're with anything, like with any college paper, right? If you wouldn't put it in your college paper, probably isn't a great source to listen to. So make sure you verify what you're listening to and making sure that it's accurate. And, happy if anyone has questions, Caleb and Dylan have my information. Happy to talk to anyone, and just, make myself available, because I think it's important to talk about financial literacy and be able to talk to someone who does this on every day.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I would lastly say, I don't feel like anybody's really exempt from needing to know financial literacy. I feel like we see a lot of people that have a lot of money, like celebrities, athletes. They come out of their careers, and because of the way they were handling their money, and because they lacked that financial literacy, they're struggling now after their careers are over. So I think it's something that everybody should know, and the earlier you start, the better, to be honest.
Yeah, unfortunately, everyone has limited time. And so, Caleb, to your point, with athletes and, all of these people you think they have so much money, and then you find out they die with nothing. Where did all that money go? People taking advantage of them, spending, because it doesn't matter what you earn. It matters what you save. Are you going to be disciplined to do this so that maybe you can afford nicer things in the future? So it's just really important. It's really important to, think about these things, and really just kind of get it under control, and do what you can now, so that, you can plan for a better future.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for your added information. And I'm definitely going to use all of that knowledge I gained today going forward. And Libby, I'll definitely be texting you or calling you soon to ask for some advice for sure.
Absolutely.
So, thank you again.
I will too, for my mutual funds.
Of course. Awesome. Well, thanks guys for having me. And I look forward to seeing both of you soon. And I expect texts from both of you.
Of course. And I want to encourage everyone else to, tune in to next month's podcast. Thank you to the 13th Man again for this opportunity.